Hello guys, so it's the second week of sinusoidal graphs and equations. Last week we looked at sinusoidal graphs and determined the amplitude, the period, the range, the domain, the midline or median value. We learned how to put graphs into our calculator, change our windows to see if the equations were correct, and we made equations of graphs. This week I'm going to give you equations and you have to actually come up with the amplitude, the period, the median, midline, the max and min, and the range. Okay? So we're going to go through and we're going to look at the equation y equals a, let me see what color I have here, y equals a sine bx plus c plus d. And we're going to write our equation first in that form. Now, a and b at minimum need to be 1. They can never be 0. They have to be at least 1. Okay? And C and D, if they don't exist, they're zeros. So if A and B don't have a number in their spots, they're 1s. If C and D do not have a number in their spot, they're zeros. Okay? So this one says, example 1, for each of the following determine 1, the amplitude, 2, the period, 3, the midline value or the median value or midline, 4, the maximum and minimum values, and 5, the range. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to write this equation in the A, B, C's, and D's. Okay, so we have y equals 5, so we have our A, sine. Now, if you look, B is always located between sine and the x variable. So B is always located here between the sine and the x. A is always in front, C is always behind the x but in the bracket, and D is in the back after the bracket. Okay, so let's go back to here. I'm actually going to do it in black so you can see it better. So we're going to go y equals sine. Our b is between sine and x. Well, there is no b. Remember, if there isn't a b or an a, then it's the number 1, right? So we're going to get sine 1x. Now, is there a c? Is there something after the x in the bracket? No. So if there's no c or no d, we put them as zeros. So x plus 0. And then there was no d at the back, so I'm going to go plus 0 again. Okay? Now we're going to go do that for each of the equations. So for B, our A value, we don't have one, so that means it's a 1. So if we don't have an A or a B, they're 1s. If we don't have a C or a D, they're zeros. So we're going to get y equals 1 sine. B is 6 because it's what falls between the x and the sine. So I'm going to get bracket 6x. And then I don't have anything behind it in brackets, so I'm going to put a plus 0, so my C is 0. And I don't have anything in the back, so my D is 0. Page 2. I have y equals 0.3 sine 2x. So I have an A, I have a B, I don't have a C or a D, so I need to rewrite it. So I'm going to have y equals 0.3 sine 2x plus 0, and then plus 0. Because I don't have a C or a D, they're going to be zeros. Okay. For this one, my A is -3. My B is between sine and x. I don't have anything there, so my B is going to be a 1. And I don't have a C or a D. So my C and D are going to be 0. So I'm going to get y equals -3 sine, open bracket, 1x plus 0 plus 0. Okay, this one I have an A. I don't have a B or a C. If I don't have a B, it's a 1. If I don't have a C, it's a 0. And then behind the bracket, I have a D. So now I'm going to have y equals 5.4 sine 1x plus 0 plus 6. F. I have an A. I have a B because it's 4 pi. It's between the sine and the x. I don't have a C because I don't have anything after the x before the bracket. And I have a D. So I'm going to have y equals 0.1 sine 4 pi x plus 0 minus 5. Page 3. I have an A, I have a B, I have a C, I do not have a D. So I literally just have that equation with a plus 0 at the back. This one I have an A, I have a B, I have a C, I don't have a D, so I have just a plus 0 at the back, so I don't have to rewrite it. I have 2, I have an A, sine, B, C, and D, so I don't have to rewrite it. So those are all of mine. So I go through, if I have to answer any questions about equations, and I fill in my A's, my B's, my C's, my D's. Okay, from an equation, we know the amplitude was our A value, and then on our equation, and then our sign was given to us, whether it was positive or negative. So when you're given an equation, your amplitude is the absolute value of A. It's the distance from the midline. So for 1, my A value is 5. So my amplitude is the absolute value of 5, which the absolute value of 5 just turns 5 into a positive number, which it already is. So my amplitude is 5. Okay, let's go to B. My A value is 1. So my amplitude equals the absolute value of 1, which is 1. Go to C. Oops. My A value is 0.3. I'm not zoomed in enough, so my writing's messy. My amplitude is always, off an equation, the absolute value of A. So the absolute value of 0.3, which is 0.3. And what is that really? That's the distance from the midline up and the distance from the midline down. Right? 0.3 up, 0.3 down, because that's what the amplitude is. My D, my amplitude, equals the absolute value of -3, and the absolute value of -3 is 3, and my amplitude's always positive, so it better be a positive 3. So what does that mean? It means from my midline up it's 3, and from my midline down it's 3, and my midline's actually at 0, so I'm up to +3 and I'm down to -3. Okay, this one, my amplitude equals the absolute value of 5.4, because that's my A. So it's going to be 5.4. My F, my amplitude equals the absolute value of 0.1, which is 0.1. G, you can try these on your own, pause them. Pause it and then do G, H, and I by yourself, and then come back and see if you got them right, so you can pause it. Amplitude is absolute value of 4, so it's 4. This one, your amplitude equals the absolute value of 9, which is 9. And I, your amplitude equals the absolute value of 2, which is 2. Go back to our first page. All right. B is the period. B helps you get the period, right? So the period is not B, and B is not the period. So when we found the period of a graph, we couldn't put it in for the letter B, right? We had to fill it into 2 pi divided by the period, and we got B. Well, same thing goes here. If we want the period, I made that dark. If we want the period, we have to do P equals 2 pi divided by B. So when you're given a graph and you want B, you have to do an extra step, 2 pi divided by the p. Now here, if we want the period, we actually have to do 2 pi divided by b, because p and b are not the same. Okay? So, let's go back. I'll pick a different color. That's too red. Okay, so for number 2, we need the period. So the period, I gotta go in closer. So the period equals 2 pi divided by my b, and my b is always what's between the sign and the x. So it's 2 pi divided by 1. So it's going to be 2 pi. So that's the period of A. The period of B, the period equals 2 pi divided by b, and b is what's between the sign and the x. So 2 pi divided by 6. And when you reduce 2 and 6, you can take a 2 out of both. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So you're going to get 1 pi, or just pi, over 3. That's your period. Next page. So for here, we're going to have the period equals 2 pi divided by my b. b is what's in beside my sign of my x, so 2 pi divided by 2. The 2's cancel, and I'm left with pi. For D, the period equals 2 pi divided by my b. My b is what's between the sign and the x, which is a 1. So 2 pi divided by 1, which is 2 pi. E, the period equals 2 pi divided by b, and b is what's between sign and x, so it's 1. So 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. For number 2, the period equals 2 pi divided by b, which is 4 pi. The pi's cancel. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I'm actually just left with 1/2. So this thing repeats itself 1/2 horizontally. G, the period equals 2 pi divided by pi over 2, which is the same as you flip and kiss, so 2 pi over 1 times 2 over pi. Because when you divide by a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal, which has the pi's cancel, so it just equals 4. Or if you just went 2 pi divided by pi over 2 in brackets in your calculator, it would give you an answer of 4 as well. This one's going to be the period is going to equal 2 pi divided by b. b is what's between sign and x, so 1.57. That's your period, 2 pi divided by 1.57. So for the period for I, you're going to get 2 pi divided by 0.3. And that's your period. Okay, let's go back to page 1. 3 asks you for the median value or the midline. What gave us the median value or the midline? Where did we put it in the equation when we did graphs to equation? We put it as D, remember? So our D is our median value. So our median value equals 0, and our midline is a line, so it has to have the y equals. So it's y equals 0. For this B, our D value is 0. So we have a median value which equals 0, and a midline, which is a line. So it has to be an equation, y equals 0. See on the next page, we have a median value, which equals 0. And we have a midline, which is y equals 0. And then for D, we have a midline, or a median value, a median value of whatever D is. D in this case is 0, so median value which equals 0, and a midline, which is an equation, y equals 0. For E, our D value is 6. So we have a median value, which equals 6, and a midline, which is y equals 6. For F, we have a D value of -5. So we have a median value, which equals -5, and a midline, which is an equation, y equals -5. For G, our D is 0, so we have a median value, which equals 0, and a midline of y equals 0. For H, we have a D value of 0, so we have a median value, which equals 0, and a midline, which is y equals 0. I, our D value is -9, so we have a median value. And as we're going along, you should be pausing these and just seeing if you can do them on your own and then checking to see if you're getting them right, okay? Median value, which equals -9, and a midline, which is at y equals -9. Okay, back to page 1. So for 4, we need a maximum and a minimum value. Now, to get our maximum value, we technically take our D and we add the absolute value of A. Now, the reasons why we do that is because we're taking our midline. So let's say this one, we have a midline of 0. So we have a midline at y equals 0. And we're adding to it our amplitude. Our amplitude is 5. So we're adding to it 5. So we have a maximum technically at 5. Then we're subtracting from it 5, because that's our amplitude. So we have a minimum at -5. So we can either sketch it out where we draw the midline at y equals 0 and then go up our amplitude and down and figure it out that way. Or we can go maximum equals D, which is 0, plus the absolute value of A, which is 5. So it's going to be 0 plus 5, which is 5. I should be doing this in a different color. I'll pick gray. And then we have a minimum. So we can use these formulas if we really want to, if we don't want to draw it. We have a minimum, which equals D, which is 0 minus the absolute value of A, which is 5. So we get 0 minus 5, which is -5. And from there we can get our range, because remember our range is just y such that I'm going to write it out as, I'll write it over here so we have it too. It's in our other notes, but just so you have it here. Our range is always y such that our minimum is less than or equal to, so slanted L, less than or equal to y is less than or equal to, so slanted L again, our maximum, and you might want to write this up here to remind yourself, unless you have your other notes handy from last week, YER. So once we do part 4, where we get our maximums and minimums, our range is really easy. Y such that our minimum, which is -5, is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to our maximum, which is 5, semicolon, y, e, r. Okay? So for B, we could sketch it out. We have a midline at 0. Then we have an amplitude of 1. So we go up 1 and we go down 1. If we go up 1 from 0, we get to a maximum of 1. If we go down 1 from 0, we get to a minimum, which equals -1. Or we can just use our formulas. So we have a maximum equals D. Our formulas are right up here, remember. Here are our formulas up here for maximums and minimums. We can just use them. I'll highlight them. So we can just use these formulas as well. So our maximum is D plus the absolute value of A from the equation, and our minimum is D minus the absolute value of A, because we're taking our midline and adding our amplitude, and our midline and subtracting it. So we're going to go D plus the absolute value of 1. So it's going to be 0 plus 1, which is 1. And then our minimum equals D minus the absolute value of A, which is 1. So it's 0 minus 1, which is -1. And then our range is going to be y such that our minimum, which is -1, is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 1, y, e, r. Page 2. So we can draw our midline. It's at y equals 0. And then we're going to go up 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, and we're going to go down 0.3. So if we go from 0 and we add 0.3, we get 0.3, which is our max. And if we go 0 and we subtract 0.3, we get -0.3, which would be our min. Or we can use our formulas. Maximum equals D, which is 0, plus the absolute value of A, which is the absolute value of 0.3. So I get 0 plus 0.3, which is 0.3. Our minimum equals D minus the absolute value of A, which equals 0 minus 0.3, which equals -0.3. So our range is going to be y such that -0.3 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 0.3, y, e, r. For 4, we're going to draw our midline. Soon our midlines won't be 0, so it'll be a little different. But we draw our midline, it's at y equals 0. It's even wrote over here. And then we're going to go up 3. And then we're going to go down 3. So if you go 0 up 3, we have a max at 3. If you go 0 down 3, we have a min equals -3. Or we can use the formula. Max equals D plus the absolute value of -3, which is 0 plus 3, which is 3. Or we can do the min, which is D minus the absolute value of -3, which is 0 minus 3, which is -3. So we're going to get y such that negative 3 is less than or equal to y. It's less than or equal to 3 y e r. For e, our midline now is actually 6. So we label it y equals 6. From there, we're going to go up 5.4. And then we're going to go down 5.4. So if we go 6 and we go up 5.4, 6 plus 5.4 is 11.4, would equal our max. And then 6 minus 5.4 would actually equal 0.6, which would be our min. So we have a max which equals d, which is 6, plus the absolute value of 5.4. It's the absolute value of a. So it's going to be 6 plus 5.4, which equals 11.4. Or we have a minimum, which equals 6 minus the absolute value of 5.4, which equals 6 minus 5.4, which equals 0.6. So your range is going to be 0.6 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 11.4 YR. F, the midline at negative 5. And then you're going to go up 0.1, down 0.1. So negative 5 plus 0.1 is negative 4.9, and that would be your max. Negative 5 minus 0.1 is negative 5.1, which would be your min. Or you can use the formula maximum equals negative 5 plus the absolute value of 0.1, which equals negative 4.9, or the minimum equals 5 minus the absolute value of 0.1, which equals negative 5.1. And your range is going to be y such that negative 5.1 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to negative 4.9, YER. For the next two, please pause, or next three, sorry, please pause and try them out. So here we have y equals 0, and then I'm going to go up 4, down 4. 0 plus 4 is a maximum equal to 4, and 0 minus 4 is a minimum equal to negative 4. Here we're going to have a max equal to 0 plus the absolute value of 4, which equals 4, and we're going to have a minimum equal to 0 minus the absolute value of 4, which equals negative 4. So we're going to get y such that negative 4 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 4 YER. This one we have a midline at y equals 0. We're going to go up 9, down 9, and we have a max equal to 9 and a min equal to negative 9. So I get a maximum equals 0 plus the absolute value of 9, which equals 9. And I have a minimum, which equals 0 minus the absolute value of 9, which is equal to negative 9. And my range is going to be y such that negative 9 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 9, y, e, r. And then I, we have a maximum, which equals negative 9 minus the absolute value of 2, which equals negative 11, or a minimum, which equals negative 9 minus the absolute value of negative 2, which is, or sorry, not negative 2, positive 2. So you get negative 11, or we could draw it. Y equals negative 9, go up 2, go down 2. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7, which would be my max. Negative 9 minus 2 is negative 11, which would equal my min. And then my range is going to be y such that, sorry, this is 9 plus 2. My maximum is wrong on here. It's right up there. Negative 7. Sorry. So it's going to be y such that negative 7, negative 11. Wow. It's like 9 o'clock at night, and I am making mistakes. Sorry. So it's my minimum, which is negative 11, is less than or equal to y, is less than or equal to negative 7, y, e, r. All right. Let's look at example 2. Example 2 says, consider the sinusoidal functions of the form y equals a sine bt plus d. A is greater than 0, which we need to know because that's the only way we're going to know if it's positive or negative, so we know that it is positive. Write the equation of a sinusoidal function with no phase shift, so no c value, with the following characteristics. So our amplitude is 7. That gets us our a. And we know that our a is either plus or minus 7, and in this case it says a has to be positive, so a is 7. Our period is 2 pi, so p equals 2 pi. And our midline equation is y equals negative 4, so d equals negative 4. So we have a, we have d, we need b. Remember, our period is not b, but we can get b by going 2 pi divided by the period. So we're going to go 2 pi divided by 2 pi, which completely cancels into a 1. So remember, period can never be the b value, and b value can never be the period, but they are two things that can help get each other. Okay? So now we can write out the equation. It needs to be in the form y equals a sine bt plus d. So we're going to get y equals a, which is 7, sine, bracket b, which is 1, so 1t, or we could have just put t, minus 4. You try the next one, okay? Pause it and try it on your own. Amplitude is 2.5, so a is positive 2.5 because it still said that a has to be greater than or equal to 0. This is so messy. The period is 1 radian, and the midline, so my d is 6. From the period, I can get the b value. So b equals 2 pi divided by p. So it's going to be 2 pi divided by 1, which is 2 pi. So now I have a, b, and d, and I just have to fill them in. So y equals a, which is 2.5, and it's positive only because up here it said a has to be greater than or equal to 0. If not, it could be negative. B, which is 2 pi t. I forgot the sign. It's too late. I maybe shouldn't be doing podcasts at 8 o'clock at night. Okay, or 9 o'clock at night. I don't even know what time it is. Okay, 2.5 sine. My iPad says 8, but it is an hour behind. So 2.5 sine 2 pi t plus 6. Okay, this one wants you to determine the range. So in order to determine the range, we need a maximum or a minimum, right? Well, maximum and minimum, I guess. So we need A and D, because our maximum equals D plus the absolute value of A, and our minimum equals D minus the absolute value of A. So this is our D because it's at the back and it's not in the bracket with the X because the X doesn't have brackets. And if there's no A in front, the A is 1. So we're going to get negative 2 plus the absolute value of 1, which equals negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1. Our minimum is negative 2 minus the absolute value of 1, which is negative 2 minus 1, which is negative 3. And now I can do my range. Because my range is y such that my minimum, which is negative 3, is less than or equal to y, is less than or equal to my maximum, which is negative 1, y, e, r. And this one says a is greater than 0, so a is positive. So our a is actually a, and our d is actually d. So our maximum is going to equal d plus the absolute value of a, which is actually that. So d plus the absolute value of a is d plus a. Our minimum is d minus the absolute value of a, which is d minus a. So we're going to get our range, which is going to be y such that our minimum, which is d minus a, is less than or equal to y, is less than or equal to d plus a, y, e, r. And that's it for sinusoidal equation notes. The next lesson is going to be sinusoidal word problems, and then we'll be done the unit on sinusoidals. So we don't ever get to do triangles, which I know everyone loves when they hear about trig, but this is the trig you get to do in 30-2. Hope you guys have a great day.